Welcome, everybody. It is August 27th, Sunday, 2023. Here for another live critique. And I guess we'll just kind of start. We have a few people in the chat here, so I've kind of reordered things to kind of be in order of who's in the chat. Is it Alexandre?
I mean, you can just say Alex.
Alex. Okay. Yeah, I've been curious how to pronounce it.
Like the English version. I don't mind.
Sure. Cool. Well, so yeah, this one is honestly, I think you're pretty much done for the most part on this. I really like. I forgot to put the old version because it's always fun to look back and forth. But also, I didn't bring up your reference either. I totally forgot about that. But honestly, overall, I think you've done some really great edits here. The one thing we did talk about, well, first of all, the things that are just absolutely working. You know, you have the streaky snow now and things like that. That's really nice. Not so eye catching, you know.
Yeah.
Overall, it's really working. There was an kind of a warm fill, I think, you know, kind of around here and through some of these guys. It looks like you took that stuff down. Looks great. Did you also boost the rim that's on this foreground element?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. If anything, maybe you can go just a little bit more. Maybe bring it kind of in line with what's happening with these guys, just to show that it's in the same world. Right now, if you kind of squint, all of this kind of gets lost. But then again, do you really want to look at it?
Yeah. It's like on the side and in the corner, so.
Yeah, I honestly, that could be like a CBB. It's totally fine. I think you're good. If you want to just kind of move on to something else.
Yeah. Well, I can start a new project, but there is one thing I kind of finding a bit weird, to be honest. It's like the shadow on the door.
Oh, right.
And like it's not affecting the wall behind. I'm not sure why.
That's
like
true.
I don't have any light blinking, so I'm kind of finding it a bit weird.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll try. Yeah.
that's a good point. Well, obviously it didn't really hit me. So and it's a small enough thing. But yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, I think you just gave yourself a note.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think getting that to be a little more in line, as far as what it could be. Like I do see. It's interesting, yeah. I'm not really sure why. It's all the same lights, you said, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, this is the kind of thing. It's a very, like, the image is complete enough that I would feel comfortable with you kind of addressing this in comp if you needed to. If you've got your lights separated, and if there's like a fill light that's right here or something, and you have a mat, maybe like a geomat or crypto mat or anything for that door, you could bring up this area. In the sense, it's even easier if you just kind of roto that, and just kind of bring it up a little. That I think that's a totally fair thing to do, and just get it to feel a little better. Yeah. Now that you mention it, that's like all I'm looking at. But other than that, I think it's pretty good.
Nice. Sounds good.
Cool. Any thoughts from anybody else here? All wonderful and good. Cool. All right, moving on to Andre. How you doing, man?
Yeah. Hey.
Hey. So, I did the same thing that I did kind of last week. I just took some screenshots of the video that you posted. This one I did had the foresight to throw some reference in. And yeah, no, I think these are good updates. I also have the older version. One thing I really like that you did is, you know, we no longer feel the it doesn't feel like a cone of, you know, fog anymore. And this, let's see, probably better if I actually, yeah. We don't feel this cone anymore, and we don't feel this shape anymore in the new version. So that's awesome. One thing that I think that we've kind of lost, especially compared to your reference does have some like some pretty darks, by the nature of being kind of a live action kind of film, which they tend to go a little more dark, and I think you've maybe lost that a little bit.
Yeah, I distanced myself a little bit from that.
Okay.
Because of the whole thing of not being a live action.
So that was on purpose.
Being a bit more cartoony and so yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That was the.
I think it's cool. I do feel like it's maybe just a little fogged, but you're totally right. You don't necessarily feel totally married to this. This was just kind of what I was going off of, but no, I respect that decision that you're making. I forget if this is a thing that's for this shot. I forget if it's a thing that's affecting the whole shot, but one thing that's kind of catching when I just kind of look at his shape overall, this bit right here that's catching, it kind of pulls the shoulder forward a little bit, which he is kind of, he's kind of doing this, right? So it is the pose that he's doing. I am wondering if that's something we, if we want to maybe pull back this rim just a little bit so it doesn't catch this plane quite so much. But I forget that if it's a temporary thing, like as he's acting, does his shoulder pop in and out of that? If it does, then it's fine. That's something you may want to look at, but overall I think it's working fine. Honestly, the big thing for me now is it just feels just a tiny bit over fogged.
Okay.
But and then for this hot spot, is there anything we can do to maybe reduce the specularity of the, just so it doesn't clamp quite so much? It's totally fine that there is a spot there, but maybe just not quite so bright so it doesn't conflict between this area and then here, because we would definitely want to be looking here.
Yeah.
And then for this one, same notes, honestly, just a little bit too fogged. This is actually, it's a little strange because it's almost like I see a shape in the fog in the background that kind of does that, and then we still have some nice darks, and I'm just wondering, like, it's not like an even gradient across the image, which I think is probably what's knocking me. And actually, now you wouldn't even want it to go that direction. I think you'd maybe want a little bit more fog kind of as it recedes that direction, as opposed to the fog coming from right here. But I also get that you, similar to this one, and I think your previous iterations, people were wondering what was motivating, like this light. So you put a fog here to kind of make it seem like there's something actually there. So I respect the decision to want to do that. The other bit was, and this gets a little nitpicky, but her eyes just feeling a little gray. They're hard to read. Kind of when you squint, it's just, you don't really get a good sense of her eye whites and stuff. So just make them a little bit more readable. If you have any control over like eye specs or anything like that, that'd be really nice to get in there. Just your general character lighting kind of stuff. But those are the main things that are here with me. I think you've done a good job kind of getting the spirit of the reference you were going for, and then still trying to make it work for an animated environment. So I would actually consider these notes fairly small.
Cool.
Yeah. Did you have any other questions or thoughts, or?
No. I think these are good. I'm gonna work on them.
Cool. Cool. Sounds good. All right, moving on.
All right. Thanks.
Sweet. We have Darwin, and I think this one was mostly just to kind of show the general updates. We had the water working. It looks like there's also kind of reflecting the matte painting into the water as well. Changed out the IBL, and then we've also done stuff like there's some caustics kind of coming up onto the boat and onto her. This area down here used to be very black. That's now no longer so black. Overall, I think this is working really well, and I think you can be pencils down. A couple things that you just tech issues that you might want to do. You can see, like, as I zoom in, this is getting pretty pixelated. So, like, the JPEG compression, I'm not really paying attention to, but there is kind of an outline right around the boat that I'm seeing, which that's probably a comp artifact coming from somewhere. I don't know if you're doing any sort of color correction or if there's anything with the water that you're doing that's not quite lining up with the edge of the boat. But just look into that, and we're still seeing, along a similar line, we're seeing an edge down here underneath the boat as well. So just pay attention to that kind of stuff, and when you do your final render, do what it takes to clean that up, because that'll just help things feel a little more professional. But overall, it's all working really well. I don't see any of those kind of artifacts around her. I don't know if that's a comp artifact or not. I think that's just the way the shader's playing. Not really seeing it anywhere like around, the other character or anything like that. I do like, by the way, what you've done with the rim light that we had on the face and everything. It no longer feels like just a line. I actually feel shape and all that. So you've done a good job with that as well. And same thing for here. Yeah, overall, I think you can be pencils down and move on this one. All right, and then we have this one. This is looking pretty cool. You said that you've kind of you adjusted kind of the white and black point of this one, doing some more grading. I am wondering if maybe you took it a little far. Here was our original one, which was working fairly well. I do understand why you wanted to have a bit brighter on the ground, and maybe even a little this is starting to feel a little clampy, and maybe these flowers are a little eye-catching because they're kind of clampy white. So like I understand wanting to kind of push and pull those brights and darks. So overall, this is feeling pretty cool. I just think that for the grass, I think you went maybe just a little bit too far. It's feeling just a little bit kind of clampy green. So maybe just bring that back very slightly. And then for the paper, yeah, definitely, again, it's just a little overexposed feeling. But then also, I'm not sure what happened to the background. It looks like the background actually went darker and a little muddier. So whatever you can do to kind of bring the background to feeling a little bit more like it did in this one. Because right now, in this one, even though everything felt a little dark, it felt in the same world, while this one suddenly doesn't. It kind of looks like an image plane mapped to the back now. So, yeah, does anybody else have anything for this? Any thoughts?
Nothing from me.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Nothing from me.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I can go. Yeah.
Do you think that the butterfly on the top one, the middle one,
This one?
could be lighter because of the backlight of the sun?
Yeah, if there's like some surface there, that might be pretty cool. I mean, you could also say, same could be for this one as well.
True. Yeah.
It's, I mean, that would be a really cool addition. If there's some time to kind of adjust the shaders, that would actually be really cool. And that would actually, because like one thing that I really love about this image is that we're feeling, a decent amount of bounce coming in, and it's not all like she's backlit, but you still read everything, and I really like that on the character, and I think you're right. Getting a little bit more complexity in some of the other characters, not necessarily bounce coming up, but some backlight, or sorry, some backlit subsurfacing a little bit there. This is pretty cool. It's almost like a stained glass kind of feel. Yeah. One thing to look out for, just like in the last one, by the way, is I am seeing definitely around here, but maybe a little bit over here as well. Yeah, just between the matte painting and the actual environment, it looks like there's some comp artifacting there. So just make sure that your alpha channel is working as intended as you're finishing this one up. All right, this one's new. There wasn't really a description written up for this one, so something that would really help in some of these chats is when you guys post, it definitely helps to go like, hey, here's the image. If I'm doing a reference, this is why I chose this reference. If there's like a story you're trying to tell in the image, it just helps the conversation. But this was the reference, and then I just kind of moved the. I just moved the render to the side a little bit so we can see both. Overall, I think this is looking pretty good. In my first thoughts were that you may be a little warm in the fill. I'm not really sure, because she's fairly neutral, maybe a little cooler in this fill. So trying to get this same kind of feeling here would be good, because right now it's feeling a little warm, and some of that could be the surfacing, but if you could do anything to kind of get that into the same world, that'd be great. The light coming from this direction, kind of hitting here, this is working pretty well. My only thought about that is that it is a fairly complex model, so something that's kind of working nicely on, alright, one sec. Yeah. Something that's kind of working nicely on the reference image is that we have... come on. There we go. We can read the this light kind of consistently across the entire form. And it's a fairly simple shape consistently. Unfortunately, on this one, again, it's a fairly complex model, so we read this shape, we read this shape, we read this shape. It's a lot of different bits that don't quite visually feel connected. Even though it's definitely the same light, it's just I think we need to somehow simplify it a little bit, and that's something that you're just gonna find throughout your lighting journey. No matter how complicated the character or anything like that, you're always looking to simplify the forms and get a really good read, because most shots you have less than a second or two, and then it's done, and the film has moved on. So you really need to make sure that you kind of read this stuff really quickly. So what can we do about that? It's the way that I approach stuff like this is I will usually put maybe even two lights. One fairly, this is not necessarily accurate to scale, but like something fairly broad coming from this direction, and then like if we were looking at here's the top of a character, a light like that, and then another one maybe a little bit smaller like that, but then if you position them correctly, they'll read as one light, and you can get some of, it starts to feel like a single light kind of hitting all these planes, but then this light helps to kind of fill in some of the really dark gaps that appear, and it will start reading as one light. So that's something you could probably try there. One other thing that you might want to address in the surfacing is, some of these hot spots that kind of come in. Do what you can to kind of tone that down. That's part of what's kind of not really helping you as far as the general read. So I don't know if you've already done any surfacing adjustment to the scene that you get, but I would do that for this one. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I don't know if like raising the roughness of the cape or like the radius of the light could help with the hotspots and things like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not, like for the hotspots, maybe not the radius, but you know.
Yeah, the radius of it would help too, though. I would definitely adjust that roughness, because right now, like, yeah, it definitely feels very like a very plasticky kind of material rather than cloth. Which honestly is not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely like sharp reflections are way harder to light if you need to get shape out of them. So whatever if you can get away with softening it, I would absolutely do it. The overall brightness of it, generally, I think is pretty in line with the reference. It's just then it, every so often it's definitely hitting a spot like that. So. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Increasing the size of the light, or the radius. Cool, okay, so then we'll hit the very last one here. So in the chat we had talked about kind of taking a step back and just really analyzing, like, okay, how do we simplify the read of this image? Here's kind of the previous version here. The notes that we kind of mentioned, one thing that I did like about it is that earlier we were getting really, 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 really inky darks, and we're no longer getting that. Unfortunately, now we've kind of just flattened the image completely. I'm not totally sure. I think there's two lights here. There's kind of a directional light from that direction, and then a dome light kind of filling in absolutely everything else. And we just need to kind of work on that key fill ratio there. But then on another thing, I think this is... I'm wondering if it's the... partially the lighting, but also the composition that's kind of working against us. Where right now... so if we go back to this one, we have this really big mushroom here. I'm actually not sure how close it is to her because, the stem does go off screen here, so I don't know if it's offset at all or if it's shadowing her in any way, or if it should be. There is a light kind of hitting here, so things have been angled to, light her, I think. But then, I think right now it's like one big directional light hitting, all of what's happening here. And unfortunately, in a thing like this, you want to establish depth, and you don't want to do it completely through fog. So what we would normally do with something like this is, you're definitely going to want to use a directional light, but then you're going to want to break it up in some way, either with shadow cards, noise, some sort of gobos. You might want to break it up with multiple spotlights, area lights, things that read as one big light, but can maybe read as like dappled light coming through a bigger forest. Something to kind of, again, lead our eye to wherever it is that you want to lead it. There's another thing kind of in all these renders I still wasn't really sure about, which I was kind of hoping we would do in the chat. Where would you like our eye to be led? Because we have two obvious choices. We can go like, this is the subject, and in which case we could effectively backlight her so she's almost in shadow, and so that we, our eye goes that direction. Or we can be primarily on her, at which point we'd want to put most of this into shadow. Or we can kind of split the difference, and maybe keep this bright, but then all of this kind of goes into shadow. So there's many ways that we can take this, aside from actually just editing the actual composition. One more thing is that this stuff still feels pretty sparse to me. And I don't know if there's really going to be any way that the lighting is going to fix that other than, duplicating maybe some more grass around. Just really fill this area up, because right now we do see this hill geometry that's it doesn't feel quite complete to me. I wasn't sure if any of this has been edited after the fact, or if this is the scene that you guys get with this mushroom scene. I've seen a few of you guys like the mushroom scene. They're all different camera angles and stuff, so I think I was kind of assuming that everyone's been doing their own camera work. So, do you guys have any thoughts on this? Or suggestions on kind of how to... Again, I haven't broken up this scene, so maybe you guys are a little more intimately knowledgeable about what you get as a default from these scenes.
It looks pretty close to default, with the exception of the red mushrooms.
Okay.
And it looks like the large mushroom, the one that you and I had like gone over multiple times,
Right.
was the holes that are there. They're actually
This one,
yeah.
Okay.
So if you see those holes on the cap,
These guys.
those are actually all the way through.
Interesting.
So that gives the ability to do like God rays or something coming out of the mushroom.
Okay.
So that might be something to draw attention.
It's kind of doing like...
Yeah.
Actually, that might be kind of cool. Something that... Yeah, I think it is a big, it is a pretty broad conversation on like what exactly you want to do with it. Without that conversation, you can take it infinite number of ways. So, but that's a cool suggestion. Like kind of,
What's the render engine that you're using on this? Is it Arnold or?
I don't know if they're in the chat.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, if it's Arnold, I'm not sure. Like through Hypershade and the Arnold shaders, how to do that setup that we had done for underneath.
Oh, trying to get kind of a
Yeah.
underneath illuminated.
Get the ribs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That might be something. But something that I ended up doing on mine for the subsurf, which may help too, is adding the specular and adjusting that with like a levels or a color ramp.
Mm-hmm.
So it boosted a little bit. And then for the subsurf map, I created my own just because like as the mushroom gets closer to the cap, it has like a new growth there, and it ends up being a little more subsurf. So I ended up creating that underneath the cap.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And that seemed to help.
Yeah, I think one thing that also helped, I remember yours was, you simplified the composition pretty significantly. Like, I think you pretty much just took this guy and then maybe some of the smaller ones and kind of created almost like a fairy circle around it.
Right.
And that was the majority of the composition, right?
Yeah, I mean, I added some foliage and stuff like that, but I mean, that was pretty much just her and the mushroom.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Adding the foliage really helped, because I do feel like these bits here, next to a lot of bare ground, it starts feeling a little incomplete. I think adding some of that... It is interesting that... I'm actually, what I'm trying to say is I'm curious how far others have been able to take this without doing significant layout edits and significant surfacing edits, or if most people are like, no, I need to do something to it to make it all work.
I mean, I've seen some pretty elaborate layouts, but
I think it
yeah,
also depends on how advanced you are on the course and everything.
That's fair.
Like if you're just starting, then it's like you normally, or at least that's what happened to me. Like when I was starting, I would be like, oh, this is the scene.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only lighting here, and then now I'm like, no, I need to change the textures and I need to change the camera and blah 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 to make it look better and stuff. So
That's very fair. It's yeah. I will say probably the most successful that I've seen, at least the most unique. Certainly, change all that stuff. But if you're fairly new, that's not even necessarily an option. So that's a very fair take. Yeah, I think maybe the next steps for this one is to say, okay, well, to really have the conversation about where we want to direct the eye. So even if you don't want to change anything about this composition or the shaders or anything like that, we just need to sit here and say, okay, where do we want to look and how do we want that to happen? Because right now it's even kind of with the newer lighting, it's still a little bit kind of a wash across the whole image. And if you were to kind of, go pretty far out, you still don't quite know exactly where to look. Going this far out, kind of my eye does go a little bit more right here because everything goes black, which is, it could be what you want. But that's actually another thing about, some of these very dark darks you don't necessarily want because they can start to feel broken. Which is one thing that we were kind of talking about a little while ago, which has been addressed. Some of these mushroom caps were feeling very almost broken dark. They no longer do, so that's good. But yeah, I think those are our next steps, just to kind of, once we're back in the chats, just talking about, like, okay, what exactly do we want to do with this? Like, don't post a new lighting update, just talk about, this is my plan going forward. And, talking through an end goal and then a possible roadmap to that is just as important as actually lighting the scene. So I think that's probably the next steps for this one. And honestly, I like the idea, honestly, of like having lights kind of coming out of here. I haven't seen something like that. I kind of dig that. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go and stop the recording. Thanks everybody for attending, and I'll get this up ASAP.